So hi, Kevin Proteau here with Locals Supporting Locals, and another special segment. We're still at election time here. It's October 11th. The official day for voting is October 20th. We do got some pre-votes going on already. We're at the Shopper Center, and this is an all candidates for on the environment, and that's something we're very passionate about. And the theme of all of our calendars is real living with real food. And if you're not familiar, please do pick one up. And I'd like to read something in here in regards to environment here, because one of the things that we're a big proponent of is the banning of glyphosate, because they're spraying that through all of our BC forests here. So just to read here, how is it affecting our nature and environment? The BC government allows logging firms to aerial spray clear-cut areas to kill weeds before replanting. This saturates the land with glyphosate. The low-level foliage is toxic for grazing herbivores such as deer, and also toxic for microorganisms, which is food for many of the other species from the bottom up. So if you wonder why, like, we got all these deer coming into our communities here and a lot of other animals, it's because they got no food left out there. And so we need to be addressing this if we're talking about real climate change here. So yeah, very informative calendars. By all means, pick one up. And actions start from the bottom up, grassroots up, and that's why we also included in our calendar here the World Business Council on Sustainable Development here. This is coming out of the UN here. It shows you all the big corporations that are behind this corporate sustainable development, and that's why we got to keep our solutions local and keep big corporations out of our communities. We're smart enough here. We're organic capital of Canada here, so looking forward to this All Candidates Forum, and like us on Facebook and vote Kevin Proteau. I will be your watchdog on City Council. You got 6 votes, okay, so in that 6 box, just check Kevin Proteau. You've already got your 3 or 4 that you already want, but I will be your watchdog. Thank you.
Begin by acknowledging that we are meeting this evening on the traditional and unceded land of the Sihilik, or the Okanagan Nation. Thank you for coming to this All Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Okanagan Similkameen Conservation Alliance and First Things First Okanagan. I wish to extend my warm greetings to all the candidates and thank them not only for attending to present their ideas, but also for the fact that they have put themselves forward to do a service for our community. And I think we should applaud them for that right now. I have 2 regrets. I have more regrets than that in my life. I have 2 regrets about this evening. The first one is that Judy Sentes is unable to speak because she has laryngitis, but she's here in the audience. And Lynn Kelsey has had a family emergency and is unable to attend. I don't have any other apologies, or maybe everybody else is here. Briefly, I would like to let you know a little bit about the 2 local groups that have come together to sponsor this forum. OSCA provides a variety of opportunities for people of all ages to connect with nature, inspiring them to learn about, care about, and to protect our unique natural environment now and in the future. Their work includes the Meadowlark Nature Festival, held annually on the long weekend in May, eco-studies environmental education programs for schools and home learners, habitat management seminars for agriculture, industry, and community groups, spotlight on species events, raising awareness about species at risk in our region, and developing and providing a variety of resources available at no charge on their website. First Things First Okanagan is a climate change education and awareness group. The mission of First Things First Okanagan is to promote awareness of climate change and work to find solutions for a better future. We wish to inform Okanagan communities about the consequences of climate change and inspire them to take action. Lobby representatives from all levels of government to support policies that reverse the buildup of greenhouse gases. inspire individuals and communities to reduce their greenhouse footprint or greenhouse gas footprint, and to network with other regional organizations to strengthen climate change awareness and stimulate effective action. The organizers have prepared and presented to the candidates 6 questions in 2 categories, 3 on the control of greenhouse gas emissions and 3 on the local environment. Each of the candidates will be asked only 1 question from each of the categories. So in other words, each candidate will answer 2 questions that we have put forward to them. And I wish to say that there are a couple of the candidates on the stage who unfortunately have not had an opportunity for some reason to not read the questions. So that's unfortunate, but I hope we can deal with that as the evening progresses. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer the first question and 1.5 minutes to answer the second question. Timekeepers are seated in front of the podium and will give a 15-second warning card and a bell at the allocated time. Then there will be questions from the floor. Members of the audience can submit questions on cards that will be distributed by society members standing over here by the door. If there are many, please be succinct on the topics of the evening, i.e. conservation and greenhouse gas emissions. Please be succinct. Questions will be reviewed by the society members. If there are many written questions, time constraints may dictate that not all questions will be asked. Please raise your hand as the evening progresses if you would like a card, and one will be delivered. Following the questions from the floor, each candidate will have about 1 minute to 1.5 minutes to give follow-up answers or closing remarks. That time depends on how long the evening goes on and how you are all feeling. Candidates will be presented questions in alphabetical order. We will begin for the first question at the end of the alphabet, and for the second question at the beginning of the alphabet. That's about as complicated as I can get it. I will now step onto the floor, and I will invite the first candidate to come up and answer the first question. The first question, excuse me.
It might get a little higher.
Testing?
No, that's the disconnect. Go up about half.
Oh, thank you very much. For trade places?
Sure, you want to answer the question?
Well, I asked them.
Oh, there you go.
So our first question is mayoral candidate Dominic Wheeler.
I don't know, I lost mine too. We're done.
Is there another sheet? Yeah, I don't know where they are. Like I said, you know, starting at the end of the alphabet and the beginning of the alphabet is about as much as I can handle. So the first question for Dominic Wheeler, what role do you see for cities in addressing climate change?
The role that I see for cities in addressing climate change is to head for a net zero model, or net zero plus if we can. Georgetown, Texas is currently the largest U.S. city to run solely on solar power. I believe that we can use a mixture of solar and wind power to create a net zero plus model where we're feeding back into the electrical grid. Thank you. Yeah, no, did you miss all of that?
I caught every word. Is that your presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it. You want me to walk away?
Sure. Second question is for John Vasilaki. John, what can Penticton do? What municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you very much. I can let you know now that I'm not an expert on this subject. I never have been, and when I do become mayor, I'll have professionals telling me what has to be done, and it will get done. But I did a little bit of research, and I have information that would be helpful to the people sitting out in the audience. I think municipalities can take a leadership role in addressing climate change. We can set greener building codes and abide within our own municipal buildings. Example would be when developers are building walls, putting up a building of any kind, they can also build green living walls as they do in many countries of the world. I've traveled extensively and I see what other countries and other cities do in their municipalities in order to prevent all this climate change to happen. They plant plants on actual concrete walls and they grow everywhere. Every high-rise in southern Mexico and central Mexico, that's what they do. They also have gardens up on the roof. We can educate the public on what changes they can make and how these changes add up and contribute to change. We can explore new ideas for keeping organic waste out of our landfill. Is that a minute and a half already? Holy cow. And I'm only halfway through. Thank you.
Next question is to Connie Salma. Connie, what steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
There are several steps. I would start with, we need to be accessing right now, the federal and provincial governments are handing out a lot of money for energy retrofits. We have a lot of older homes that we need to really focus on, first of all, reducing the amount of energy we're using. And that would start with insulating our homes better, sealing our windows better. Another way is to really encourage people to get into a more active type of transportation. I know this sounds crazy, but bear with me, because going on the same way as we are, that's pretty crazy too. But I would really like to see parts of our city being designated electric only, such as why not have golf carts? They're a hoot. They'll get you where you gotta go, and it'll lower our infrastructure bills. There are so many strategies that we can be using right now. Clean energy is in there, but we need to start the first things first. That is, start with our energy capture and conservation.
Thank you. Katie Robinson.
Read back to the first question.
Katie, I'll ask you this question, the same one I asked Connie. What steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The simple act of turning off your lights as you leave a room or changing your light bulbs to LEDs has a substantial effect on the planet, not to mention your pocketbooks. Replacing appliances with the Energy Star ratings also helps in both of those areas, and you can save even more energy if you take a dry towel and put it in with your wet clothes in your dryer. Toilets and showers with flow restrictors combined with turning off your tap while you're brushing your teeth all seem like small measures, but they all add up. Consider walking, biking, or taking a bus instead of your car. We all think of manufacturing and vehicle emissions when we think of our climate change. So if we stay on that train of thought, then keeping transit flexible, accessible, and readily available might reduce the number of cars on the road with the added benefit of physical health when we walk. Recycle, 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 that cannot be overemphasized. We should strive towards zero waste. We have automated curbside pickup for garbage, recycling, and yard waste, which goes in the compost bin, but we have yet, here in Penticton, to implement compost pickup. So beyond the obvious benefits, these trucks will idle less, they require less man hours as well, and our composting facilities reduce landfill waste and create a usable product. Thank you.
Frank Reeder. Frank, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
That would be question number 2. Good evening. I have a number of items that would be fit into that category. For one, to promote Penticton for our own residents to use our vacation facilities as, in effect, staycations, less driving, a lot more efficiency through doing that. I would encourage support for local agriculture, so less food has to be imported, and certainly with a lot of the arable sections and agricultural land reserve lands we have, that could be improved. I would encourage and support increased use of transportation, including transit and cycling, and that could be helped, for instance, with our new parks master plan. We're talking linear parks for more walkability. Other pathways could be built in Penticton, as well as trails. I would encourage and support green building initiatives, and encourage as well as support for the increase of Penticton's parks and green space. In addition, for Penticton, the transition to green energy with initiatives such as Summerlin's solar project as a model. Summerlin's residents can now sell surplus solar energy back to the city's electrical utility. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Kevin Proteau. Kevin, what role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
Good evening, thank you everyone. Climate is something that I'm very big on here. I brought a bunch of the calendars there on the table there. Anybody's welcome to take one. I think municipalities are getting in the way of citizens and individuals making changes their own way and moving as fast as they feel is appropriate for addressing environmental issues they feel is most important. With lower taxes and less intervention, people can act either as individuals or work collaboratively more faster than any government ever could. There's lots of great innovations out there that are coming out that we can put into our own homes and backyards and everything. And so I think municipalities need to step back and let people do them on their own. I think a lot of us care about the environment. We don't need to be told. Thank you.
Marie Pryor.
Good evening, folks. My name is Marie Pryor, and the question is...
Marie, your question is, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, anything that limits smoke emissions, and I'm talking about vehicles on the road right now. And one of the issues that has been going on for quite some time is the pollution from trucks and cars, and there's black smoke pouring out of sometimes diesel trucks, and it is unhealthy and it is easily changed. What I'm thinking is also the wood fire burners in the community also need to be upgraded and to make sure that they are not polluting areas over which we have no control. So a standard for the wood fire burners would be a requirement, and also for cars and trucks I think would be a good idea if we could provide a service certificate when we have our trucks and cars reinsured, that says that it's had an upkeep and a grade to qualify for clean emission as much as we can. We certainly don't want to go back to the Vancouver testing, which was difficult, costly, and ineffective. So there are other areas that we can work on, but one of the most important things is to really try to get out of the car and do some more walking. Thank you.
Thank you. Christopher Millen? Oh, Christopher not here?
Not yet.
Jesse Martin? I'm sorry, sir, what is your name?
Thanks.
Sorry? How are you? Oh, yes. No, you're up a little back. So, Jesse.
Yes.
What role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
I think the most important thing that a municipality can do to deal with the issue of climate change is to be proactive. I think too often when a problem arises with the city, we're reactive to it. We kind of wait till things go a little too far and then try to throw money at it or patch it up. But if we're able to identify problems before they become real big problems, then we can deal with them when they're smaller. The way to do that is through data collection and analysis. And I think the most efficient way to do that is by collecting data from the citizens of Penticton. If we had a way for everybody that lived in town to be able to contact the city and say, hey, I feel like this is a problem, we can deal with it, and the information went straight to the city, then we would be able to prioritize problems and see them as they come up and measure trends along the way. So as soon as you see something changing in a negative way, you can do something about it before it becomes a really big problem. It's like if your car is starting to break down, you hear your tires are starting to make a noise, you want to get to it then before your bearing seize and you lose a wheel on the side of the road, right? So it's about getting there, being proactive before things actually get to be an issue. On a side note, thank you. On a side note, I feel like the little things that you do can go a really long ways. And I'll never forget doing some research. I'm a teacher. I was doing some research for a lesson, and I came across an interesting fact that said that anybody who works for Disney, that means time's up? Oh, okay. I'll get to it later. It's about Disneyland.
You want them to come back up now? All right, so Doug Maxwell. Doug, you can answer from down here or up there. Okay. Doug, your question is, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Doug Maxwell here. Can you hear me? I would push really hard for new housing in Penticton to be fitted with solar panels, windows and walls to be above the BC building code, and meters that are reversible. They're available in Penticton right now. New bylaws on lawn size, xeriscaping need to be put in place along with planting the right trees in the right direction. In summer, to give us shade in the summer, sun in the winter. The correct mix of deciduous evergreen trees helps a lot when you're planting a new house. Innovations like this can encourage owners of older homes to retrofit theirs as well once they see things happening. So taking this to the next level. It can go on and on from there. So we have to put in some new building bylaws, and people with older houses will see the advantages and they'll take advantage of them as well. Thank you.
Chuka. Chuka, your question is, number 3, what steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, personally, it'd have to be a personal initiative on everybody's part. You'd have to sort of educate the people, let them know, that they can reduce the energy, because the individuals are the only ones that can actually do anything about it. Because if one person can reduce 1 kilowatt per week, if you get everybody in Canada to do that, that's 30 million kilowatts per week. And I'm talking about like one light bulb, 60-watt light bulb for an hour and a half a day. You just got to tell people these little things, and you got to get them all involved. You got to let them know why they're doing it. We're not saving this kind of stuff and cutting down on greenhouse gases to stop global warming. Global warming is here. We're going to have to live through it. We can't stop it. Mother Nature took control. We're going to have to adjust and change for it. But the reason why we're doing all these things and saving all this energy is so that we leave something for our grandchildren. There's an output organization that calculates how much sustainable resources we can use in a year. 2017, we used our year's allotment of resources in 8 months. That means we borrowed 4 months worth of resources off our grandchildren. We're not going to pay those back. They're going to go without. And they're going to go without unless we figure out how we reduce how much energy we use. If you care for your grandchildren and you want them to have electricity and you want them to have all these nice little fancy things, stop using electricity. Stop driving your car. Buy a bike, turn the lights out. This is for your grandchildren. It's not to save the world, it's not to save the environment, it's not to save global warming, it's to leave something for your grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Juga. Jake Kimberly. Jake, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, thanks to the Alliance for organizing this tonight. This is my 10th campaign, so I'm very pleased to see this kind of event happening because it does mean that everybody's starting to take a notice of what climate change we need to make. But anyway, with regards to the municipality, as a lone municipality in the south end of the valley, we cannot do it alone. There's no sense in us promoting and campaigning for climate change if the other municipalities are not cooperating with it as well. So collectively, we have to do it collectively. This valley is a very sensitive environmental area, and if you don't look after it from city to city, then we're all going to suffer because we on the bottom end of the lake will get the impact of all that. But the one thing we must do is try and stop planting the hillsides. Stop building on the hillsides, because the more hillsides get developed, the more need for cars. It's been a known fact that if a house is on a hillside, the family needs 3 vehicles minimum to do their communicating through the city. Build downtown, you get away with 1 car. You build in densification, you get away with 1 car. You don't have to have 3 cars in a family. Another thing that just as an aside to this, for example, here's a simple approach from the municipality. Municipality contracts out taxi services in the city. And I've seen several taxis that are hybrids. I would make sure that before awarding those contracts that all the taxis are hybrids. That's one step in the right direction. Thank you.
Andrew Jacobite. Andrew, what role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
I think the biggest one right now is just our official community plan, and it needs to have strong policies dealing with fire smart buildings, landscaping, elements of the building code, and actually the densification, so how we grow, obviously growing in denser areas versus going up to the mountainsides. I think we can lead by example. We put a grant request in for a solar farm on some of our civic buildings. We've done a lot of LED light conversions in our buildings and street lights. If there's a way of leveraging the Okanagan College, it's one of the largest living buildings, and they have a passive house daycare now, and they do have sustainable construction management, so using that to influence others. Xeriscaping workshops and a demonstration garden to get more people thinking about that. Better transit, and promote more of a promote and create more of a walkable and cycling friendly community and neighborhoods. Development cost charge reduction, so it incentivizes people to use more energy efficiency in their building products and also their landscaping, that sort of things. And also investigate alternative energy options. And I talked about solar earlier, but hydroelectric is one that keeps on creeping up. In the past has been cost prohibitive, but technology is always improving, costs going down. So I think we need to always be revisiting that. Same with, I think Tesla has a solar photovoltaic shingle for solar, making that more accessible and again, leading by example, having it on some of our civic buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Before I call up the next speaker, I just want to remind you that you can write a question down on climate change, and if you put your hand up, someone will come over with a card, and we'll have a chance to ask that question later in the session. So if you're not hearing the questions that you want asked, please take advantage of this opportunity. Our next candidate is Isaac Gilbert. Isaac, what steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you, Jim, and everyone for being here tonight. As Andrew says, we do have legislation, a bylaw in our city to help reduce our greenhouse emissions, which is the official community plan. The city passed that plan in 2002, and in the community charter of our official community plan that we are subject to by the British Columbian government, we have to have a formula, and we have to be leaders in reducing greenhouse emissions here in this town. I believe the city has done it. Andrew has said we've seen LED lighting, we've seen building code changes, but in that official community plan, we have 9 policies supporting organic composting, encouraging people not to use single occupancy vehicles, encourage alternative transportation such as biking, walking, and cycling, and encouraging the community to promoting emissions reductions, which I have not really seen much in this city. It is unsafe and not convenient to ride a bike in the city. It is inefficient to take the public transit system here in the city. And it's about working towards that, working with the community, finding out those problems, and being able to make people safe and convenient to get around this town. So the steps to taking that, we have a new official community plan coming out, making sure that we stay accountable to that new official community plan here in this city, and that when we have developers and we as a council come in, we have that always in the back of the mind. Sustainability, environment, the economy, and the community around us. That, as me as a councillor will be doing that on there, is to stay accountable to that and hold people here accountable to making sure that we reduce our greenhouse emissions. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question is for Joe Frockledge. Joe, I'm going to ask you the same question. What steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
I'm not an expert on this, but if the mic went, so I'll have to do it this way. I would turn around and give some incentives along with solar panels and windmill stuff. I've actually did a couple of things with the solar panels and stuff like that, but we have to... You can't hear me? No, you can. Okay. We have to give an incentive for people to turn around and start using more of these things that are available to us. And what incentive is happening right now? Really, there's nothing in plan. So it's something we need to look at a little longer. And as a group of people, we buggered this system up ourselves. So now we want to repair it. Well, let's repair it before it gets too late. And I'm a big fan of solar panels. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Joe. Our next question is for mayoral candidate Jason Cox.
No, it's going to be for the Senate.
So Jason, what role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the organizers in hosting this meeting. It's an important topic, and I think the municipality has a unique role as an organizer and a coordinator of these initiatives. So there are a number of programs that exist with the federal government and through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There are also opportunities that we have to engage students through the Canada Summer Student Program, and we can get them out working on anti-flood mitigation or planting seedlings in areas throughout our city to create more trees for shade and better use of the park. I think that the province and the mayor and council's role is to be the lead advocates, spokespeople for the community to take these ideas, our Made in Penticton solutions, to the other levels of government and non-governmental organizations to bring investment back to our community for incentive programs. For example, when Fortis or an electrical provider has an incentive program for residents to convert lighting fixtures in their home, or an education program to move people off of peak hour usage, so that we get lower rates for the end user, and also we have a system that works longer and costs us as a city less. That education piece of moving people to off-peak hours, that is the role of the municipality, to educate and to advocate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Our next candidate is Darren Clark. Daryl.
Never Glenn. Daryl Clark.
I apologize. Daryl, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
First of all, I think my answer to all three of these questions is pretty much the same. The city has to show the leadership needed to take the first steps to get the environmental back on track. With the OCP coming up, we have a chance to put in better bike lanes, we have a chance to put in better buildings, we have a chance to upgrade as we go along. Our school district here has been a leader for geothermal, and they're not only saving money, but they're reducing greenhouse emissions as they build new buildings and as they retrofit their old. The city has some pretty good properties that would be good for solar and be good for all kinds of other things in the environmental arena that they could do. All they have to do is step up, get the plan going. And with the OCP coming, we have that opportunity to direct our city into a future that will be good for all of us. And it's going to include new cycling, it's going to include better transportation, it's going to have to include helping homeowners get better grants so they can reduce their costs and reduce their greenhouse emissions. And we need to work as a community to help get each other out of cars. The whole downtown core, part of what they're doing down there now is to help get people out of cars and help make it more friendly to walk down there. And that's becoming the design of most modern cities, is they're trying to figure out how to get people out of their old gas-guzzling, belching cars and things like that. We have to work together to make that better transit. Bellevue, Ontario has on-demand transit where you phone them and they come to your door. Is it time we look at that? Maybe it is. There's a whole lot of different opportunities that we have in the near future with the OCP coming up that we can set this town in a new direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Glenn Clark is our next candidate. Glenn, what specific municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming here tonight. The environment is very dear to me, and I'm nervous as heck being up here in front of all my peers, I'll admit it. And to boot, I'm one of the poor suckers that never got the questionnaire, so I'm not quite prepared. So the question is, how to reduce energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions in the city? I think it's a bit bigger than a city. I think the RD West, and as Jake said, right down the valley is a valley-wide thing. We used to have an air quality control officer at the RD West, and it wasn't first things first, it was first things can when it came down to trimming our budgets and stuff, and we need to get that going again. But all these ideas we've heard so far about LED lights and recycling, yes, all those little things are great, but the biggest thing I think is we got to get people back out of their cars and onto their bikes. I've been riding this town all my life. I've always been a bike rider, and I can't tell you how many times I've been hit by cars. It's nasty out there. We need better bike trails and encouragement for people to get off their asses and out into the trails. So more trails. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Karen Brown. Karen, what role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
We've been hearing about climate change forever. Since the dinosaur age, the climate's been changing with and without man. However, we're exacerbating the situation with our emissions, be it industrial or our vehicles. I agree with everything everyone has been saying here. I myself practice most of what's been going on. The reality is in our city with our seniors, and our hills, our grades of the hills, make it almost impossible for the majority of us to get out. Also the inconvenience. My neighbor is an elderly lady who recently smashed her car and is walking to the bus when she can't get a ride from one of the neighbors, myself included. But she was telling me today that how are you going to go to the supermarket walking to the bus with a cane in inclement weather? What if you have a doctor appointment at 10 o'clock? You can't make it. I am a supporter of getting on a bicycle and walking and transit. I am. But the reality is it just somehow can't make it it's inconvenient. A lot of seniors. Can you put that up a little higher because I can't see past here with the time thing? Thank you. So the reality is it's the inconvenience of the transportation situation. I loved the idea of having the bus come up and down, pick the people up at the home, make it convenient. I believe that would be an awesome solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. The next candidate is Julius Bloomfield. Would you like to answer here? Okay. Julius, what role do you see for municipalities in addressing climate change?
Well, I think that the municipality needs to be the champion of the people that really care about climate change in their municipality. And when they're dealing with the provincial and federal governments, they really need to take that message to them and be part of that change. I think that a lot of the ideas that we've heard here, they're all good ideas. We have to recognize where the problems are, where the emissions are coming from. They're coming from residential houses, commercial buildings, personal transportation, and commercial transportation is about 25% each. So dealing with residential housing, the new building codes are really quite good, the provincial building codes, but there's a lot of old houses that need retrofitting to come up to current code or those same standards. So I think that building a retrofit package for retrofitting the older homes where there's a benefit from the city, the province, and the fed all rolled into one to make it simple to do those retrofits. I think that's an important thing. You can't ask people to get out of their cars unless you've got a good alternative, and upgrading the public transport system is a must if you're going to encourage people to get out of their cars, and building those bike paths as well is another part of that puzzle. Don't forget the commercial buildings. There's some massive structures there that would benefit greatly from better insulation and having solar panels on the rooftops. And that's my time up. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Mayoral candidate James Blake.
Thank you, Vanna.
James, what municipal actions would you champion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Amazing technology exists out there. I can go on and on about how Europe has entire solar fields, and China is putting solar panels in lakes and supplying entire cities. And Denmark has got wind farms out in the ocean. The technology exists out there. And we're in a unique position because if we start installing those in the city, we can pump it back into the grid and actually reduce our monthly expenditures. But let me tell you a couple stories that I think comes down to where I see our problem. I was working at a concession stand the other day, and a gentleman comes up to me and he says, "Hey, I hear you're running for mayor. What's your campaign logo? Is it Make Penticton Great Again?" And I really hadn't thought of a logo or a motto, and my first off-the-cuff thing was, well, let's bring us into the 21st century. And he laughs at me and he says, "People won't like that here." And I was in a meeting the other day and I brought up the topic of putting windmills out in the lake, and somebody laughed at me. We have to be able to accept change. And I know it's difficult, but in all of these meetings I've gone to and everybody I meet in this city, there are so many ideas here. There's so many passionate people about this city. We need to come together and move forward and not be afraid. Be brave, and we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Our final candidate for the first set of questions is John Archer. John, what steps would you take to encourage Penticton residents to reduce their energy use and overall greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you. I think it's obviously a local-based action that needs to occur in the city. I think educational programs for city staff and the public should be used to raise the awareness and interest in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. That requires a plan of action by the city administration. Incentives for all departments within the city are also necessary for such reduction. And there needs to be policy and regulations. There needs to be goals set and results reviewed annually to ensure compliance of such and accountability. Incentives motivates a particular course of action. They can be voluntary, such as rebates for builders or homeowners to purchase energy-efficient appliances and materials. Also, incentives have been proven to be beneficial tools for energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I believe, finally, that a complete survey, and most importantly, of transit needs should be reviewed and changes made where necessary to meet demand. I would also encourage all residents to walk one day and perhaps consolidate 2 days of car use into one and to use their cars less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's the first round of questions, and I'm thinking to myself that a candidates forum like this, where people get to address a specific topic, gives us an opportunity to hear a lot of very good ideas. And I'd like to thank the candidates for giving us some thought and giving us something to think about. So the next questions are around the natural environment, and I want to remind you that you can still get your questions on climate change in, so we can ask them later. So I'm going to ask John Archer to come up again, because you're the first guy on the alphabetical list, which I think I understand. So, the natural environment. What can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
Thank you again for the question. The first thing I think Penticton can do to be a more fire-smart community is to enforce bylaw 7.2 bracket A bracket regarding accumulation of rubbish, garbage, and discarded material. Part D, no accumulation of dead landscaping, vegetation, and noxious weeds. K, accumulation of building materials unless under permit. Educate, educate, and educate. The city needs to inform businesses and citizens regarding the proper maintenance of homes and yards. Smart landscaping around the home will also reduce the risk of fires and of burning. New development should be fire guarded from the surrounding forests. Bylaws should mandate the use of fire guard materials in all of their house construction to include fire-resistant roofing, siding materials, and particularly in urban and natural interfaces. Thank you.
Thank you, John. James Blake. James, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
We certainly need more parks. It's a benefit for all of us to be able to walk to a park. Would be great if that could be our policy, that every park is within walking distance. But also too, on a bigger scale, I think we could do something that realizes not only our little tiny place in the world, but migratory animals. There are so many animals that fly over, cross over our lands, and if we could make it so those animals had safe places to migrate. We're losing monarch butterflies because they have nowhere to go. There are things like that that we can expand and think outside the box and stretch ourselves a little further and become a working part of the environment and not a detriment to it. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Julius Bloomfield. Julius, how could the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitats?
I think the development community, they like to work with what people look for in building a development in the city. And I think that putting a xeriscape plan into development guidelines, into development permits, is a good first step. Creating natural wildlife corridors, if they are developing in the upland and the hillsides, which I don't agree with, but if that's the case. Building fire protection around the city is an important step as part of any development that goes on in the future developments within the city. And creating microparks in the city as well, because in the downtown redevelopment areas, I think that that's something that's quite often lost, and there's great benefit to be had from microparks. Also building or regenerating wetland park areas. We've lost a lot of wetland park areas in this valley over the past 100 years, and I think that working with the Indian band, if they're willing to do so, and creating some regenerated wetland park areas would be a great benefit to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Karen Brownlee. Karen, I'm going to ask you the same question. How can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitat?
Thank you. Well, as a person who owns a company who myself does the designing of landscaping and my company installs the landscaping, I know it from the ground up on how best to do it. I know that we all function best when we have some green space around us that does require watering. We do need to look into and are looking into more drought-tolerant plants such as cactus, junipers, etc. We can go through those directions and place those in our yard, but it is imperative that we do keep the watering at a bay with that and choosing those plant materials so that we do have that green space as well as the trees, the colors, the foliage that we are now experiencing in the fall. So I think for the incentives for the developers and the property owners to conserve it is just to go either xeriscaping with some beautiful xeriscape plants. I think that that'd be a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Clark. Glenn, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
When I moved to town here, there was a lot of wetlands as we entered from Kelowna. There was red wings everywhere, and so they plowed it all out, developed on it, called it Red Wing Resort or something. It's like there's hardly any wetlands left. There's a few along the beside the channel there, so we're going to have to champion that for sure. The local environment, we're expanding into the hills apparently again. That's where all the fire zones are. We gotta just tame that development in the hills back. We gotta I want to see, Campbell Mountain and always stay as is a bike park, right? It'd be wonderful there. So more parkland and protect what we have left because there's not a whole lot. Thank you.
Daryl Clark. Daryl, what can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
We can educate the people, and we can do better building process. We can plan our communities that are on the outskirts of town. We can plan them better with better building materials. We can plan them with better layouts. We have to plan with emergency access involved. We have to make it so that if a fire does start up there, we can get people in there and we can get those fires put out. We need better access for the service crews, but we need to plan our communities so that we have fire breaks between us and the forested areas. And we have to plan very carefully so that we're not going out into some of these areas where this is going to be a real problem. We can make better choices about the building materials we use on the side of our houses so they don't catch fire. You see some of the horrible stuff going through California now, and every now and again you'll see a house that's still standing. A lot of times it's still standing because of what it's made of. Our city crews and our forestry crews, we have to look at our fire department a little differently now, because some of the areas where they're going into, they have to take a water truck in with them because it's not feasible to put water lines up there. So we have to look at the safety of our community and how we're building our community, and that's also part of the OCP coming up, is we can't just put development wherever we want it. We have to plan it carefully, and we have to plan it for and with the environment and the future in mind. So we have to step back, we have to take a deep breath, and we have to look at how we're going to plan our future developments, and we have to go back through the developments we have now, and we have to build better fire guards, and we have to make safer egress routes for the people, and so our emergency services can get in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Mayoral candidate Jason Cox. Jason, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitats?
Thank you again. I think that the role of the municipality again is to provide education and incentive to homeowners to do things like using rain barrels and collecting rainwater for garden use and watering, using permeable surfaces to reduce runoff and to landscape with drought-resistant plants. But I also know that on the development side, I used to be a commercial banker, and I worked with a developer who worked very close to the Oxbows, and he understood the importance, and I think the bank and the city also communicated the importance of respecting the Oxbows. I know that there is federal funding right now to preserve wetlands, and so we can tap into that to make sure that the Oxbow, which is still our carbon sink in this community, that drinks the carbon out of the environment and turns it back into clean water and out the other side, and a habitat for animals and birds is essential. We also need to respect the water, and I think we need to work with the federal government as well to make sure that we're keeping invasive species out. I know that there's an aggressive program around Okanagan Lake on the mussels, but not in Skaha Lake, and as we know, they're connected. So the municipality has a broad role in advocating for everything from our lakes to our wetlands to how we're doing it in our homes. And yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you. Christopher Millman is here. Christopher Millman. Okay, so that was Jason Cox. The next question is for Joe Frockridge. Joe, what can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
The city could enforce by using different testing, I think of smoke detectors, etc. Fire extinguishers in the homes, businesses regarding all of the wildfires. The city could invoke a stiffer penalty for man-caused fires. Can you hear me now? Okay. I guess I got to talk louder. And these penalties are not really being set out. They need to be stiffer. I'm going down going from Penticton to Kelowna. I'll bet you I counted a half a dozen people throwing cigarettes out of the cars and trucks. Something like that needs to have a very stiff penalty on it. We need to look at it a lot harder and in a group that we can turn around and actually all sit down and come up with ideas. I mean, we're smart people. We're not stupid. We wrecked our poor homeland here. Let's fix it back up again. So that's some of the things that we could actually do and get ahead of this all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, our next candidate is Isaac Gilbert. Isaac, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitat?
Thank you, Jim. Once again, in the city, I'm going to refer a lot to the official community plan because that's our guidance document. And in that plan, we already have a permitting and building code permits for our developers in this town to protect the wetlands and the waters around us. And it's making sure that when we go into council that we are holding them accountable to that because the water is what we drink. And it's very important because we need to respect the riparian areas, our foreshore with rare species, and also, too, respecting our neighbors across the channel. The water is very important to the First Nations culture here, the Okanagan Nation Alliance. So going into council, it's about making sure that when developers come in and are asking for easements or putting the building close to the water, is making sure that when they do that, they're respecting the environment that's going into that. The incentive of that is, if we look at our art and our culture here, and the way that we talk about, the way we look at Penticton, a lot of it's talking about the hills and the beauty of our nature around us. And something that's more controversial is when do we as a city decide what's the threshold to developing a line around the city that says no more building into the hills? At what point do we do that? And that's a tough question, it's a challenge, and I'm more than willing to take on that uncomfortable question to figure out a plan of when do we stop destroying the hills and building more development into there. And I'm more than willing to step into council to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to making sure that our natural environment here and the developers are accountable to making sure the natural environment stays the way it's at. Thank you.
Mayor and mayoral candidate Andrew Jacobite. Mayor Jacobite, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
Same question. Well, official community plan is our biggest thing. That's, again, the blueprint for our future and how we're going to grow. And in that, it's going to identify how we're protecting wildlife corridors, buffer areas, riparian and sensitive areas, and wetlands. We have an urban forest strategy. We just started this year, so some of the neighbors, we started saving trees, so adding more vegetation and canopy cover. In the OCP and some of those design guidelines, if there are hillside developments, having more larger pockets of natural grade. If there is a new subdivision, having a minimum of 5% be set aside for a park and not the rocky cliff face in the back corner. Big thing we did last year was partnering with the regional district and creating a conservation fund, and that money was being leveraged with other grants to do projects, and some of the projects were around Penticton Creek and coming into the channel, and we'll be dealing with some of the oxbows and keeping that preservation going. We've been partnering with a couple agencies and province on species at risk and creating red zones. So you might have heard of a nugget moss. You can't see it, it's microscopic, but it's actually halted a development subdivision because of that being species at risk. And if we are to expand the Esplanade area, keeping that as a natural park or natural area, we do have master plans for Penticton Creek and Ellis Creek, and you've seen that restoration taking place.
Thank you. Chief Kimberly. Jake, what can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
Stop spreading into the hillsides. Stay away from the forested areas. Forestry interface is known to create major fire risk for communities. We saw it in Kelowna. That was a result of the development in Kelowna that went straight into the forested areas. Too difficult to protect. There was loss of properties, and we cannot and should not be looking at anywhere near the forested areas around our city. That is just asking for trouble. Not only that, it's the response time. When I was in the office, we looked at centralizing the fire department down into the industrial areas. So, because those of you who have lived here as long as I have, you've seen the city grow. The city is spread. We are now a city from lake to lake. So the central location of a fire hall should be in the industrial area where they can respond in a good time to get to those areas. But the concern I have, and I've expressed this publicly, is where we're going up in through the Wiltsea and beyond the Wiltsea to where the cliffs are, the climbing rocks are. I guarantee you within a few years there's going to be a demand by those residents up there to have a substation fire hall up there. That's going to cost everybody money. That's going to cost everybody money for putting those houses up into that area. Then you're going to find out that that's the wrong decision.
Thank you. Mayoral candidate Juka Lorino. Juka, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
First thing I do is acknowledge that we don't own the planet. We share with a few million other species. They have just as much right to be here as we have. So we got to figure out a spot where the ducks go. And this is their turf. We're going to set aside an area for the ducks, get them off the beach. And if we don't have a perfect area for the ducks, we're human beings. We can terraform a little bit, make a little area for the ducks. That's where the ducks could live. We have a bevy of swans that live on Skaha Lake. They love it there. We should set aside a little area down there, riparian area for those swans to live. We don't leave them alone though. We also go there. We build little pathways and boardwalks so we can go there and watch these animals and the ducks do their thing. There's no reason why tourists can't come here and pay $5 for a 25-cent bag of seed and feed the swans. And the whole city, we got lots of room here. We just got to share the space. We got to figure out who belongs to what animal. We get what's left over. It's great that we have deer walking through the street. The ducks here obey the traffic signals. I've seen them. They stop for the red thing and they wait for the walk signal, like they've been here that long. But we share this place with them. We got to set aside places for them. We got to set aside parks for them. We don't have to actually make parks. We just have to make areas that are theirs. And that's if we're going to save the environment and we're going to save these people or save ourselves, then we have to share the whole thing and set aside places for them all. That's all. Thank you very much, Juka. Doug Maxwell. Doug, the question to you is, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitat?
Well, I prefer to mandate those and not give incentives or money away. So mandating new builds are the direction we need to go. Mandating xeriscaping, saving shade trees, limiting lawn signs, installing solar panels, reversible meters. Once existing homeowners, I've said this before, all of the questions that were asked tonight could be answered in one big statement because they're all very interconnected. But let's encourage our good developers to try new projects like net zero housing was said earlier. I saw net zero housing in Alberta and at the end of the year your utilities are zero. Yes, it's a little more expensive to build, but your utilities are going up every year. And wouldn't you like to have a zero utility bill come year end? There's other great ideas out there that I'm sure developers who've done this for their career can help us with, but we need to get a hold of these developers and get them on track. I don't see any solar panels in Penticton yet. If there is, there's very few, and I think we should really push on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. The next candidate is Jesse Martin. Jesse, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
I think what we need to do is we need to ensure the next generation of youth are going to be more environmentally aware than we were. So I would start there. And what we need to do is offer more outdoor recreation opportunities. There's a reason why I'm fortunate enough. I was very outdoorsy growing up. My dad got me into it at a young age. And I've had a love of the outdoors ever since. But there's nothing that I could have done when I was a kid here in Penticton. I grew up in the cusp. And a big part of that is the fact that there's nowhere to fish. And I know that sounds silly, it sounds way off base, but it's a family activity, it's an activity you can do at any age, and it teaches an appreciation for the environment. If we can foster that in people and make them care about it, then it's going to change mentalities right there. We used to go out and we wouldn't come home until we had a liter or a bag full of trash. And a lot of times we had more trash than we had fish. So it starts there. It starts with getting our youth and creating opportunities for the youth to get involved in the outdoors. Right now at Skaha Marina, there's a lease that's going to be up in, I think, a year. There's an opportunity to do something there with the docks. We could build a dock there. It would allow people of all ages to fish and gain an appreciation for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Christopher Millen. And Christopher, what can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
Hi there. I just want to apologize for coming in late. I had an art opening tonight, and it ran until about 7:30. I wasn't expecting it to run so long. Anyway, Saint Germain Cafe, great kids art on right now. Obviously, over the last 2 years, we've seen that our fire risk has grown exponentially. August is pretty much a write-off these days. I think it's been said before. I agree that we need stiffer fines for, and we need to actually regulate these get to the core of the problem here by fining these people and following through with these fines who are caught lighting fires. But I think it starts with an education. We need to create an education program around fire and fire risk. And I know it's always been around us because we're in a desert land here. But I think the carelessness of smokers and the carelessness of people playing with fire is worse than ever right now. And I know a lot of these fires are started by lightning, but I think it starts with education. We need to start to create some education plans that start in the schools that talk about fires and fire risk and where we're heading in the future with drier lands and less water and whatnot. And that's where I'd like to go with it. Thank you.
And actually, I think, oh yeah, sorry, we're doing okay. Our next candidate is Marie Pryor. Marie, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitat?
Well, you've heard all of these sensible suggestions, and for the most part they're all valid, and we are all probably on the same train. Obviously we need to encourage more natural ecosystems in gardens, synthetic grasses. Maybe we could have rainwater barrels like we used to have in the old days, with small discounts provided by local communities that are interested in preserving our water and our gardens. We could build restrictions on new and existing properties to allow for more green space and usable parking facilities. Provide mandated playground facilities to educate and encourage proper use of green space by our children, and develop small local ponds in the parks. We used to come up here and camp around the Oxbow down by Skaha Lake, and our kids, there was a little channel there, and there was a little pond, and they would stay all day long feeding the turtles, capturing the small fry, and they had a wonderful experience about living, being involved in community. Our children need that experience. We need fountains, maybe in gardens, rose gardens, more environment that is friendly to walk through and really enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Kevin Proteau. Kevin, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
The local environment. Well, I mean, because one thing I keep hearing here is if we're supposed to be taking responsibility for everything that's going on, in the world, like we're the ones responsible. I'm getting this wording wrong here. Like, I gotta go to the fires here. Like, people just don't understand, like, if a house over here burns, it doesn't go start a forest fire. It's the forest fires that come in and burn over here. So what's happening outside of our towns is what we need to be looking at more aside from being internal here, because we got too much monocropping going out in our forests here. They're being sprayed with glyphosate, and it's killing all the weeds and food for animals out there. And essentially, one spark, and we're losing tons and tons of forest, and that's what's creating all these forest fires, but nobody's looking at that. And the BC government makes laws to force logging companies to spray this glyphosate. And it's very important that we start talking about that and get glyphosate banned in BC and stop it from being sprayed and stop the monocropping that's going out there so that it doesn't hit us internally, because we're not going to fix it inside here and stop these fires. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Frank Rieger. Frank, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitat?
Thank you. I think what a city council needs to do is, well, to start with, we can look at what are other municipalities doing to try and look for best practices. Incentives, I think, can be reversed as well, and what penalties can be inserted as well to try and encourage water conservation and natural habitat. The xeriscaping is promoted as one area. I'm not sure communities are ready to move entirely to xeriscaping, but certainly the amount of property that needs to remain to receive watering can be limited by a municipality. There are other measurements, perhaps of placing covenants on property to control environmental protection and restrictions of cutting of mature trees and ensure that enduring awareness of communities to future development approval conditions. Would also say that we could discourage building up into the hills, where I think there's going to be more water requirements. So the hills in the Pentictons, by increasing perhaps development cost charges to discourage that happening, or all the way through to just the zoning restrictions are such that we're eliminating the ability to have the houses in the hills. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Katie Robinson. Katie, how would you encourage protection of the local environment within the municipality?
Thank you for the question. Penticton's first environmental strategic plan was actually developed during my first term of office back in the very early 1990s, and it's helped us preserve many areas of environmental concern over the years. So we need to continue on that path and improve upon it. Sustainable development is certainly the way of the future, and we're very fortunate to have Okanagan University College leading the way. And just FYI, they have solar panels, as does our local hospital. They've had solar panels and using solar power for years. And I would like to see more research and development in that area, considering that we have more sunshine than almost anywhere else in Canada. There is a program that's used in many cities that's called Reuse Rendezvous. And it's they hold it several times a year, and it allows people to put out free items on their curb for others to reuse. And this is advertised in papers, radio, social media, and I'd like to see that implemented here. I'd also like to see a new app for your phone called Penticton Recycles. Most of that information is actually available online now through the internet and City Hall, but an app would certainly simplify it. One more idea is encouraging protection of the local environment is another program that I will have to talk about another day.
Connie Solomon. Connie, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitats?
That's going to come down to our building code. We have had, part of why I'm excited tonight is that I'm talking to the things that I'm passionate about. It's not a matter of education. I grew up Smokey the Bear. Everybody remembers Smokey the Bear on the commercials? We've been educating, we've known about climate change for over 40 years. And it's like we're a bunch of people that have been smoking and smoking. We got lung cancer. The doctor says, you gotta get that lung out, you're gonna die. We're going, I'll switch to light and I'll try to walk 3 times a week. When we're talking about our step code building plan, we've got to insist that we get them building the way that respects the environment. Like the oxbows, that's a natural element that had filtered water and helped with our stormwater runoff. It's now so full of silt and clogged up and been ignored. It's just filled with the gravel coming off of the hills and the streets. That is a free service that we're now having to pay for to deal with infrastructure instead of what we had free. We need our developers to look at our environment as having value. Why not bioswales? Why not having permeable pavement? These things don't cost much at all, but it's a matter of thinking ahead and thinking about our communities. And I am frustrated. I look out here at the size of this room compared to the other forums. If we're talking business, everybody comes running. But you start talking environment, it's like a dirty word. The only thing you say worst is fine arts.
Thank you, Connie. John Vasilaki, mayoral candidate John Vasilaki. John, what can Penticton do to become a more fire-smart community?
Thank you very much for the question. From the little research that I have done, I think we have a lot to learn about how we can be better fire-smart community. We need to ensure our firefighters have the proper training, a full range of training they need to respond to fires that involve both buildings and land fuels. I think we need a proper assessment of what hazards exist. We can combine this information with an educational program for our citizens. I know we have emergency response protocols. I think it'll be important to consistently update these protocols to ensure we are able to address situations like we have seen in Fort McMurray and other communities in northern British Columbia. I also think that we should get together with the RDOS and figure out how we can protect the rural areas. Because if we are going to have any forest fire situations, it'll start in the rural areas and the forest areas around them, not actually within the central part of our municipality. So we have to get together and figure out how we can protect the rural areas and ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Now finally, mayoral candidate Dominic Wheeler. Dominic, how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitats?
Well, seems I'm not the only one to think of it, as been said before, but the best incentive for developers is, you know what, you don't get a fine if you do this correctly, if you follow what we tell you. Because giving one more incentive to big business is not going to do any good whatsoever for our city. All that's happening right now is that we're handing money to corporations to come in, and where do we get that money from? That would be from everybody else, the people at the low end, people who can hardly afford to live here. And the best way to do it is to make sure that the building codes are up to snuff, and then fine the people, absolutely fine them for not following them. Thank you.
So we've come to the end of the second question for the candidates. I'm going to say we need to stand up and stretch for a couple of minutes, but stay around because we've got the questions from the floor, which maybe might be more interesting to you, or less. There is a problem when you have so many questions from the floor as to how many people will be able to answer all those questions. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to give the candidates 1 minute now to do some wrap-up remarks about the questions that were presented, or maybe answer a question that they didn't have a chance to answer. And then we're going to go to the questions, and then we can go as long as people feel like staying. But we want to give all the candidates a chance to do a small wrap-up. So we'll start right at the beginning. We'll start right at the beginning with the first candidate in alphabetical order, and that was John Archer. So John, you have 1 minute to speak in a closing way or to answer another question, and then after that we'll go to questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one question that I wish to address. It was the final question on how can the municipality provide incentives for developers and property owners to conserve water and protect natural habitats. I disagree that the conservation of water and natural habitats should be based on an incentive program by the city. The city needs to mandate it. Given that the developers of the new subdivisions in this community destroy or build on natural habitats and have the nerve to name them after such, for example, Red Wing Resort, they should be required by design to limit the destruction of the environment, replace what has been removed, landscape according to the previous habitat, drastically reduce water consumption outside and inside homes by utilizing all water reduction systems and only plant xeriscape gardens. And just as an aside, I would personally ban cedar hedging in the city of Penticton, given their excessive water demands, the deformation by due to deer, and general neglect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. James Blake.
Some of us were talking earlier that have gone through this experience for the last several weeks, and we think this is about the last event that we'll be attending. We live in a city and a world with many, many challenges. Environmental is only one. We have many passionate people here that have many ideas. And no matter what happens in this election, I think it's important that we all come together and respect each other and listen to each other and move forward. And then we can get past all of the things that have made us so upset about what's going on in the city in the last several years. Thank you.
Julius Bloomfield.
Well, I feel I'm something of a living example of a lot of the things that we've been talking about tonight. I have a straw bale house that's totally off-grid, solar powered, and I live in an interface area. So a lot of what has been talked about I've actually done. I can talk about the benefits and the disadvantages of solar power. It's part of the answer, it's not the answer. An all-round approach to energy, to sustainable energy and renewable energy systems is the answer. Interface areas, I built my house in much the same fashion as a lot of the discussion has been around tonight, and dealt with interface, dealt with fire protection or forgotten about it. Anyways, making the house fire smart, putting on outside sprinkler systems, I've done a lot of that, and so yeah, I feel I'm on home turf.
Thank you, Julius. Karen Brownlee.
Thank you. It's been noted that the attendance here is seemingly more dismal than the other forums. I would hazard a guess and say there's really not much to talk about in Penticton specific, not globally or other big cities, but Penticton itself. We have changed our light bulbs. We have gotten appliances that are smart, changed our furnaces over to the smart ones. We have reduced our watering. We have planted drug-tolerant plants. So to go and beat a dead horse is kind of a moot point, I guess, when we're already doing it. We already have lots of bicycles out and about. People are walking. People are getting out with different transportation modes, despite having a vehicle parked in their garage. We are doing it already. We live in a beautiful city with clean air, great water, lots of greenery, lots of parkland. It's a beautiful place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Clark.
Hello everybody. No, I'm going to admit I'm not an expert in all these environmental issues, but it's something that's dear to me. Unlike everybody here, I'm pretty sure I've done my part as well. I'm a visual artist, and for the last 8 years I've been using my art to protest the bitumen pipelines that have been proposed through BC. Right now I have a couple of paintings, I call them my war paintings, and they're in display in Vernon. And during this time of exhibitions, I've been doing a lot of tours and talks, and I've talked at the college here, and I've talked in Kelowna a couple of times. I've talked in Prince George, I've talked a lot of places about what's going on. And at home, in my own front, you know, I've tore up my lawn and put it in a heritage garden, got the rain barrels around the corner, collecting all the water I can. Oh, yellow, red. Little things, riding the bikes, and every candidate up here, I'm sure, is doing their bit to do their bit to help the greenhouse gas emissions in the environment. And if I get elected, you can count on me to do my bit. Thank you.
Darrell Clark.
Through this whole campaign, we have been through many forums. I've heard three common themes through these forums. We all want a healthy, safe, vibrant community. Part of the healthy is the environment. Being able to go for a walk on a safe street at night, that'll reduce your stress, that improves your health. To be able to do that in an area where it's good, but every group that I have stood in front of and I have talked to, I have listened as well, and I keep hearing those same three things: healthy, safe, and vibrant. The environment, jobs, safe streets, they're all intertwined. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking to the senior group, whether I'm talking to the arts group, or whether I'm talking to the environment group. Every single group is intertwined. We have to take the silos off of each individual group and see how we can help each other to get to the better community that we all know we can have. We know we can improve the environment, and we know we can be better citizens. We can all do it together, but we have to work as a unit. We have to stop working separately. And remember, safe streets, healthy community, and a vibrant economy is what we all want.
Thank you. Mayoral candidate Jason Cox.
Thank you. It's interesting, the comment, because I was having conversations in the break about how great it is that this subject is actually much more mainstream than it used to be. And I think this is a great turnout for this topic, and not something we would have seen probably 20 years ago with this much focused interest on environmental issues in our community. So with that being said, what I'd like to say about what we can still do, and I wish I had a chance to say earlier in my speech, is just that you know, these are global problems, but change begins at home, and there are still things that we can do as a community to be for the city to be a leader. And what I'm talking about with that is we need to address the solar infrastructure, but you know, we have to remember that in the summer we have a great amount of sun, but in the winter we don't. In the winter we have a great amount of wind, and to build both those infrastructures is going to be expensive. But we do have opportunities for microhydro on the channel. We do have opportunities to improve our landfill, which creates a lot of methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas, and we can do a lot of improvement there that we haven't talked about. And the red card's coming. I have a lot more and I'd like to say, so hopefully there's some questions I get to answer. But thanks everyone for being here today. This is a great turnout.
Joe Frockledge.
better get around this, I don't choke myself. Yeah, it's over.
Thank you. You can hear me now? I want to thank everybody for inviting us all out, and especially myself. Environmental, man, what a close word to the heart. You know what I mean? We've caused the problem, really. Everybody has here a bit. So you know what? We're all into wanting to do things. You know, really, how many places can you go right now in Canada and you look out your back door and you see the deer walking? Not many. I always call this a little piece of heaven, and we have it. Let's keep it. Let's not let it go. And I know with everybody here, and we're thinking towards the right thing, we will turn around and be very successful. I love Penticton, and I don't want to see it go, period. Thank you.
Now, Isaac Gilbert.
Thank you, Jim. I was talking to some of my friends in the audience tonight, and I'm trying to keep calm up here because it's one subject that is really dear to my heart, is the environment, because the way that I see it is the environment is our grounding in society and in this world. And if we don't start respecting that environment, we're not going to be able to be sustainable and resilient and flexible with many things like our economy and our culture. The environment affects both of it. We've seen the forest fires this year. That's going to take a hit on our economy, to our tourism, and not bringing people here to town. And it's also affecting our community because you're breathing that in. We've seen a lot of floods this year inside the Okanagan Valley, and that too is hurting people's homes. It's going to make you spend more money to deal with the floods. So to me, it's something that I try to live and breathe about respecting the environment and building that culture here in Penticton, showing people that we can get around and make this place more accessible with other modes of transportation like transit and biking, and trying to get that infrastructure in. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Jacobin, please.
Thank you. So I think by some of the answers tonight, you're starting to realize there's a steep learning curve. There's going to be a minimum of 3 new faces, so having some stability, consistency is important. Bike valet, you see at the farmers market, there's average of 60 bikes, which means those 57 less cars coming downtown. I'd like to see that expanded. We are doing gas capture at the landfill using our sewer sludge as a bio cover, which used to be going to the compost, but the compost there is coming to the end of its life cycle. We are actually a fire smart community. Sendero Canyon and Spiller Road are already been recognized as fire smart communities, and last year we had our first wildfire symposium, which is hands-on training in different scenarios. We are having a car share program come here, and hopefully that's taking off well. We can use some of our city fleet to also be included in that. And the STEP code, which is forcing technology and energy efficiency in the building code, we actually adopted that. Kelowna, as an example, did not. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake Kimberly.
And thank you again for the invitation here tonight. As I said, it's the first time I've seen a forum on the environment. It's really encouraging to hear people starting to get up. But I just wanted to let you know, and this may not be of interest to the ladies in the audience, but when the event center was built, I insisted that waterless urinals be installed and save millions of gallons in a year. Those things are still working well. But anyway, that's just one of the things. But I also, in my term of office, we installed the sprinkling systems on the Okanagan Lake Park, through the golf course, Skaha Lake Park. All those areas have been taken from the outflow of the sewer plant to irrigate those areas. So we're not drawing on filtered water, which is very expensive, and that's why we must control our use of the water. And the other thing is, back in my term of office, I signed a document to make Penticton carbon neutral by 2012. That document is sitting on the shelf somewhere in City Hall collecting dust. Thank you.
J. Kimberly, Juka Laredo.
Back again. I was actually one of those, when I was young, I was one of those like hippies that you saw down in the crowd, the blood beads on, the little signs that saved whatever was on the agenda that day. We were idealistic, we were trying to save everything. And we did a really good job, actually. We brought in the EPA, we saved the whales, Agricultural Land Reserve. We did a lot of work by going out there and protesting for the environment. It's something really dear to my heart. And I'm telling you the truth, a lot of you voted. We did a lot of work and you've really destroyed a lot of it. It's not really the way it was before. It needs to go back to it. And the only way you're actually going to save the environment, you've got to do it individually. You have to do, each person's got to do their share. You got to go out there, hold your sign, you got to turn your light bulb out, or you got to not drive your car. You can't expect the government to do it for you because they can't. What the government can do, and a lot of the things that are going on here, is a matter of policy. What any city needs to do is set down some policies. Say this is our water policy, this is our sensitive land use policy, this is our lakefront policy. Put it all down in writing, all the policies, and say, if you want to come here and do business, this is how we do it here.
Thank you, Juka. Doug Maxwell, please.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to talk just a bit about the environment one more time. We seem to be hell-bent on destroying it. I'm not sure why. We have no backup. Let's think like my mother told me, and she showed me very well as well. Live simply, leave a small footprint. A new development in Penticton seems to took down all the trees because it was easier. I say let's do that better than that. We need to use all the tools available to us: solar, insulation, triple glazed windows, smaller houses that are better designed. Again, net zero housing is a big plus for me. All these things are available to us right now. Let's rethink our growth strategy. According to the stats in Penticton, from 2006 to 2016, we increased our population by only 1,800 people, which means 900 houses. Yet we have built over 2,500 units. So why is there a 0% vacancy rate? How many are just sitting empty, B&Bs, etc., seasonal? Thank you. Appreciate the evening.
Jesse Martin.
I'm going to tell my Disneyland story. So when I was doing some research for a lesson plan as a teacher, I came across a fact that said that anyone who works for Disneyland is not allowed to walk by a piece of litter. That's a rule. It's a blanket rule for everybody. That includes all the princesses, that includes Mickey and all his friends. They all have to pick it up. So I went to Disneyland with my family last year. I wanted to see this rule in effect. So I saw a nice piece of trash on the ground. I noticed that Goofy was coming along the way to do autographs and the things he does for the kids, and I thought, all right, I'm going to see if Goofy does this. So I just sat there, tried to look a little bit nonchalant, and sure enough, Goofy walks by with the kid, not looking at it, kind of talking to the kid, and all of a sudden he sees it, leans over this glove, picks it up, goes over to the waste bin that's right next to it, dumps it in, jumps in the air, kicks his heels, and that was it. Since then, we developed a Disneyland rule in my classroom. Kids weren't allowed to walk by a piece of trash. Feel free to use it in your home.
Thank you, Jesse. Christopher Miller.
When I was in my early 20s, I did that thing where you backpack around the world, and I did. I backpacked around the world for a year, and so I've seen a lot of different environments. And what I've come to learn in the 4 years I've been here is that Penticton has one of the most wonderful, scenic, clean, beautiful environments I've ever been to. But you cannot deny that it's changing. The environment is changing, climate is changing. I will admit to you that I am not as well versed in environmental issues and climate issues as I would like to be. But this is something that I would like to work 100% on to my capacity with my council, with people in the government and City Hall, with people in the city that have the answers, and try to find out solutions to get us through what we're going through now and get us to continue being this beautiful place that I came up to 4 years ago. Thank you.
Marie Pryor.
So, I would like to just sidetrack. We'd like to make some changes, but I'd like to see one small change, and it would be about the volume of advertising flyers that we get every week. I have about 2 pounds of flyers in the newspapers, and that's just one household. How much waste is that over our whole area? Shopping for food is a weekly requirement and doesn't need flyers really to remind us. An electronic flyer and in-store advertising would seriously decrease this volume, and we would be saving a tree or two. We should demand paper grocery bags instead of the plastic ones that the shopping malls are providing for us. The other thing I have is, like, you can get a free energy kit supplied by Forders, and it's available for any household, and it contains products and tips to help save energy. We need to deal with some of the small issues since we can't take on the whole world. If we start small, we will get bigger.
Thank you. Kevin Proteau.
Thank you. I really need a lot more than a minute here, so I'm hoping that people will take one of the copies of the calendar, and please do take one of the rack cards, because one shows you the problem and one shows you the solution. And I'm running for a watchdog here, so I got to go with the problem first here. So, smart growth and sustainable development is a global topic here. And we need to be very careful, because we do see a lot of droughts, fires, food costs going through the roof. And environment wasn't an issue that we did talk about like 50, 60 years ago, because we didn't really have a lot of problems. But it's the big corporations that are taking over everything that we have a problem with. So companies like Monsanto that are trying to control our food supply. We got Nestle that has been siphoning all of our water from our aquifers. You see that right across Canada, right across the United States, and fights happening all the time. So please pick up the calendar and look more into what is happening behind sustainable development, the World Business Sustainable Development here, and then look at the solutions, because we need to lock down our Okanagan, because we are organic capital of Canada, so we need to protect that. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Revere.
Thank you. I'd like to actually talk just a little bit more about forest fires. There wasn't quite enough of it in the previous session. The last 2 summers, Penticton, we obviously had a lot of smoke in the community, but no significant damage to our housing that occurred out of the fires this year. But forest fires are simply a natural force. In fact, I believe it's argued that if you don't have periodic fires, when you do finally have one, it's just going to be that much worse. So bottom line, in the interests of protecting life and property, I think the city needs to take a more assertive role about, as we do, try to promote building into the tree forested areas, that we in fact will ensure there's adequate interface, or simply start to not allow the growth to approach the treat areas as much. It's just a natural force that will happen. Thank you.
Katie Robinson.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to try and end on a positive note tonight with a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, and try to remind everyone that Penticton has been on the forefront of being a fire-smart community for decades. In fact, just recently in 2016, Penticton won the Fire Smart Community Protection Achievement Award, which is not easy to win. As a councillor, the city sent me on course to Arnprior, Ontario many years ago to the Emergency Preparedness College. And you can imagine my surprise when I found out when I got there that it was our very own fire chief who actually wrote the manual on emergency preparedness. Thank you much. That being said, we can always do more, and considering the devastating wildfires in our own province, in California and worldwide, it's imperative that we are all prepared well in advance. Public education cannot be overemphasized, and wildland interface protection is paramount to our community's well-being. Thank you very much. A vote on October 20th would be a vote for the environment.
Connie Solomon.
I'm very pleased that we're here tonight having a chance to actually talk about the environment. I think when you listen to people talk, you can tell when they know what they're talking about or not. Like if you were to start asking me questions about accounting, I can throw you some buzzwords, but it's not my strength. If we're talking about sustainability, that is my area of expertise when it comes to how to have a sustainable neighborhood, homes, and community. If you want to see change for the environment, you need to vote for a change. If you keep electing business and business only, they don't have the expertise in that area. You can't expect them to find solutions they're not aware of. So you're going to get what you vote for. Vote for a diverse council. And I'd just like to add, I am having a coffee tomorrow morning at Weston Avenue from 11:30 till 2 o'clock. I'd love to have you come down and talk more about other sustainable solutions that we can implement in our community rather easily and effectively. Thank you.
John Vasilaki.
Thank you very much for having us here this evening. I'm going to attempt to finish the question I couldn't finish earlier, and I'll start where I left off. We can explore new ideas for keeping organic waste out of our landfill. For example, how can we implement more composting within apartment and condo buildings? I can tell you in my early days in business, and I had many restaurants, we used to have 2 garbage bins in every one of our kitchens. One used organic matter, which was food. The other used all the waste that would go to the dump. The organic matter farmers would come to the restaurant, pick up all that food for their animals. That is not happening any longer. And I think we should get that program started again, and we can keep a lot of that organic matter out of our landfills. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, Dominic Wheeler.
You've all heard a lot about sustainability today, and I believe Connie Solomon has a lot more knowledge about it than I do. I've always learned about sustainability. As a kid, I was in Beavers, and they taught us, you know what, if you have to do something, if you have to take a tree away, you make sure you take a tree from underneath and you move it out into the sunlight. Transplant. It works. It worked for centuries, it worked for millennia. And then we as humans decided, well, maybe we don't have to do that anymore. Whoops. So, I've done my part all of my life, and I continue to try to do my part. I drive a hybrid now. Took me a while to be able to afford one, but hey, what can you say? I've always tried to teach my children that, and I would love to see Penticton learn the lessons that I learned when I was in Beavers. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to all the candidates for their presentations. We now have some questions from the audience. This could be a little complicated, but we'll do our best. If you want to answer the question. I'm sorry?
Maybe give folks a chance to leave if they need to, just on the
Sure.
break.
If anybody wants to stand up and leave.
Other technology that's out there to make that wood stove efficient, and you're also to respecting your neighbors and respecting the bylaw that we have here. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to take on that question? Yes, Jason.
I know that there are some older homes that have wood burning appliances and inserts. I also know that insurance regulations require upgrades to those and inspections. And I visited a few years ago Blaze King factory in town, and they showed us how they have really improved the efficiency of these things so that very little actual carbon comes out, and that requires an upgrade of your system. And I'd like to see more of that. Like I said, the insurance industry is kind of regulating that, but I think we can also put it into our bylaws. And then when we're talking about bylaws, we need to enforce good neighbor bylaws, because when people don't have efficient wood stoves and wood appliances, and it's affecting their immediate neighbor, that is a nuisance. And unfortunately, the language is a little light in the Good Neighbor bylaw. We need to be able to enforce that more fairly so that we can all enjoy the air we breathe.
Anyone else like to answer that question? Okay, we'll move on. Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I think somebody called me about this and said that because other provinces have actually banned wood stoves altogether, and I'm very concerned about that. Yeah, check into it. And I like what Jason just said there about upgrading and yeah, you'll control the carbons that way. But we have to be careful here, again, with this corporate agenda here, that we were supposed to, our energy bills were supposed to lessen when we got the smart meters in. And the bills have tripled, quadrupled for some people. And so we cannot ban wood stoves. If anything, we're going to need to put more in, just make sure they're safe, because nobody's going to be able to pay their utility bills here. So we need to be very careful on the banning of them and just upgrading of them. That's what I want to say, because look into it, because a lot of cities and provinces are banning them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, there's another question here. There has been a lot of conversation about water tonight. This question says that in 2018, the Vital Signs report says that Penticton uses 3 times the national average when it comes to water consumption. What would you do as a city council to reduce this usage? John?
Thank you. I don't know whether my idea would stop the consumption of water, but we have a $30 or $40 million facility to treat our water, and a lot of that water is being used for irrigation. Irrigate our gardens, our lawns, washing our cars, and many other uses that don't have to be healthy. I believe we should have 2 types of water system in Penticton. One's irrigation, similar to what they use in the orchards, and the treated water for human consumption. And in that way, we'll save many, many millions of dollars in treating water, and we'll put our water into better use. Thank you.
Jake?
Thank you, Jim. I mentioned earlier some of the initiatives that were taken to conserve water in the city and use the outflow from the sewer plants. But Penticton is blessed. Penticton is blessed because we've got water meters. Consumption tells you what each household is using. And we're very blessed with that because not every municipality has that. So what you can do is to monitor what their consumption is. And you can reduce it quite easily if you just control the flow that you're using in the house, how much you're using in your shower or your whatever. But low flow toilets, of course, are essential if you want to start reducing that. But the way the cost is going with water filtration, such as we've got the purest water that any municipality's got in the country. I can boast of that because that's true. But anyway, that water is going to become more and more expensive with distribution. And rest assured that your responsibility is the same as turning on a light. If you turn on a light, it's going to cost you money. If you turn on a tap, it's going to cost you money. So be aware that filtration water is expensive, but we must use caution in using it and reduce that consumption.
Isaac?
I do want to tell some of the stuff that the city has been doing. I don't own a home, so I don't see these people come around, but I do see the car driving around that's the water smart person. And for me, coming from an enforcement background, I really enjoy seeing that program go out. I do see a lot of irrigation systems watering the sidewalks or watering the roads and not being an efficient use of water. And I really do appreciate the city's initiative, and I would like to support that more. Having that person go around and making sure that people are educated about watering their plants properly, and making sure that we're conserving water in this town. And also to constantly increasing our building code. I know the city of Penticton does have a green building code to help increase efficiency in the city. It's about constantly enhancing that and bringing the standards up. And yeah, I just wanted to tell that the city is doing a pretty good job at, trying to help to conserve that water. Thanks.
Carol?
We live in Penticton, and if you don't water it, it doesn't grow in the summer. It'll die. So one of the things we need to do is we need to stop watering some of that stuff, and we need to change it to drought tolerant. I totally agree. The cedar hedges, they're out of my property. The front's coming down, and we're putting in a different fence because it does take too much water, and that's where a lot of it is going. We're keeping our lawns green in the summertime. We don't use our front lawn very much, so we're changing it out. We're going to put in drought tolerant grasses and things like that. The city can lead in that, and they are leading in that. When you go by the SOEC out in front of it, where all of our wonderful signs are cluttering everything up, all of those grasses are drought tolerant. There's a lot of areas where the city is leading, where they're using reclaimed water for irrigation and things like that. But the people in our town, we can all reduce, we can all do a little better. Maybe our lawn won't be as green. Maybe we won't have as many flower baskets. Maybe we won't wash our cars as many times. But we can all pitch in a little bit, and we can all help reduce the amount we're using and leave it for our next generation.
Karen?
As the lawn lady for 25 years, I have been on many of my clients' lawns who have expressed concern of why their lawn is not looking as good as it would be. And in probing, I have found that they start watering their lawn at 8 a.m. in the morning, the worst time of the day, one of the worst times. I rescheduled their timing for their watering. I tell them to go to the garden center and for $10 buy a water moisture meter, put it in the soil. No sense in watering your lawn if it's already wet and or damp. Save tons and tons of water. As I had expressed earlier, we do need the green space. We do need a little bit of the lawn. It does need watering. But we will be doing the watering properly, starting at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, and have it go on the system. Thank you.
Okay. This is a question about development and property rights. How do you stop development on the hillsides when property owners feel it is their right to subdivide and build homes? Isaac?
It is a tough question, and it's going to be a very controversial one. It's about striking that balance with homeowners and developers and understanding what our values are in this town and what we see as. The city of Victoria has put a line around their city where they're not allowing any more development out of there. And it's about us trying to find other options inside the city with infill and making sure that when we do that infill that we're also being respectful of the community around us as well. So as council, it's asking that tough question, when do we stop and how much land are we going to keep taking? What's that threshold, but also to striking that balance with homeowners and developers, because we don't want to just constantly be, there's got to be some discretion but also to some compliance as well.
Kevin, and then Katie, and then Jake.
Yeah, well, we all want a lot of things in life, but sometimes you just can't, so we just say, no, you can't develop in our hills. But I did attend the Design Penticton meeting, and they were talking about how us Pentictonites were talking about going up the hills and building. When it came to the Q&A, I went up and I said, well, I don't talk to anybody in town about who that wants to go up the hill and build. So you must be just talking to developers. But we were just talking about the water issue and how it kind of goes together here. So I asked him, I said, we're getting charged a lot of money for water right now, so either we have it or we don't. So did you do a water assessment for the building up on these hills? And I can't even tell you, there was at least 250 charts up and down the hills here, and they can tell you everything else, but they never, ever did a water assessment for building up the hill. And I find that very concerning, so I'd be a little questionable what the design people did.
Okay, Katie, please, and then Jake, and then Julius.
Thank you. I'll be very brief because I haven't had my dinner yet. I think the first speaker hit the nail on the head with the word balance. We definitely need that. But as far as I'm concerned, what we really need to do is not only have a brand new OCP, but we need to follow that OCP. So on October 20th, vote for people who will follow the OCP instead of changing it at will.
Jim, could you repeat the question, please, just for the comments I'm going to make to it?
Sure. The question is, I guess, about property and people who feel that it is their right to subdivide and build homes up in the sides of the hills.
Well, the answer to that question is the zoning, period. The city council has the right to zone. You may own property, but if the council don't believe that you are entitled to rezone that property for development on the hillsides, the council can say no. It's not necessary, and we can't afford to allow it to happen. Number one is fire protection up there. Number two is the services required on the hillside: water, sewer, garbage, road clearing, road snow removal. All those things come down to the municipality. They're not paid for by that development. The municipality in total paid for those extra service lines to go up there and look after those hillside developments. So again, simple answer, if the council believe it's not appropriate to have those hillsides developed, say no to the zoning. That's it.
Jake just said much of what I was going to say, but he's quite right that it is in the zoning. Property owners only have the right to subdivide and build houses if the zoning allows that. And so if they're going for rezoning to get that right, then it's not a right, it's a benefit of the rezoning. And the rezoning, really there has to be a good argument for the rezoning, and you know, I don't see why that needs to be given, you know, if it's of no benefit to the community as a whole. And, you know, rezoning applications need to be looked at where they're a benefit to the community as a whole, not just the individual that's going for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, although the province and federal government are more able to fund new technologies, what incentives is the city able to give for people to put solar panels on their roofs and have car owners purchase hybrid or electric cars? What incentives can the city give to have that kind of new technology brought to Penticton? Dominique?
Well, there is an incentive already for people to have electric cars, free parking. If you've noticed in all of the paid parking lots, there are anywhere from 2 to 6 parking stalls that are absolutely free where you can plug in your electric car. That's a great thing that the city's done. I think there should be more of them, and I believe that for solar panels, I mean, it's a very simple incentive. You get a solar panel put in, all of a sudden your electricity bill drops massively, and that's less money that the city's going to then be taking from you. Thank you.
Connie?
Already in many cities, there are programs put on by the municipality or the local utility whereby you can have your solar system installed, and they support you by letting you pay back the costs on your monthly bills. The point is not always when you can have a return on investment. This isn't about making sure we're just saving money. We're also doing this for the reason that we have to get off fossil fuels and be effective. And in order to get people to really act on this, we have to have programs in place that make it possible. Because not all of us can go out and spend $15,000 and throw it on our roofs. But if we had set up reserves and incentive for people to do so, and people pay it back at a reasonable rate, then we can actually get people taking part in these programs.
Thank you all for coming. I have to apologise, I have to leave. I have a Sheltie puppy with his legs crossed and it's urgent, so I have to go. Sorry.
Katie Robinson.
You should have a cat like me. He takes care of himself. In Penticton, we already have some charging stations, but we need more. Yes, electric vehicles are expensive, and converting people to them will take time. But the actual physical presence of having the charging station there keeps it in the forefront of everybody's minds. And their accessibility means that people will actually start to consider them seriously the next time they purchase a car. And besides, technology gets better and better every year, and these vehicles are now charging faster, running longer, and performing better.
Jason and then Julius.
Thank you. So one of the things I've been talking to people about is their experience in trying to make the investment to go solar. And I've talked to a couple of the wineries in the area that have experienced some real trouble with the city in terms of our policy right now for net metering and converting their system over to solar. So there's an onerous expectation around a legal clause for right-of-way and access, which the property owners aren't willing to do. And also the net metering isn't really net metering. They're charging more for what you take off the grid than what they're willing to pay back, which is different than what other providers are doing. So right now, we're not providing the real incentive to get people to go solar, not truly. And so I think that's something we need to address right away. And in terms of electric vehicles, I would actually like to see more people get out of cars. And I think we need a functional transit system that helps people get to and from work in a reasonable amount of time, which we don't currently have. So yes, electric vehicles are good, but big vehicles are better.
Thank you, Julius.
I think the city can get involved in pooling the benefits that the province and the federal government might be willing to add to giving grants and benefits to people that put on solar panels onto their houses. It actually makes quite a bit of sense because the less power that we use, the more power that Fortis and BC Hydro can sell down to the States, and they get more dollars per kilowatt hour than they do from us. So there is actually an appetite for that, but the benefits are rather complicated and difficult to navigate. And so I think if they were all in one spot through the city could facilitate those benefits, and that would help the consumer quite a bit.
Thank you. It's really great to get more than just yes and no answers. I really appreciate the work that the candidates are putting into this. We have a potential linear park along the old river channel, otherwise known as the Oxbows. Do you think this is a feasible idea, and would you support establishing the old Okanagan River as a linear park? Connie, and then Mary Aquaway, and Jesse.
Absolutely. I've walked through the Oxbows many times. It's gorgeous in there. Our Oxbows are so important in that they're a free service for filtering water, for slowing down the storm runoff. They've been allowed to fill up with silt so far, but there's been an active group helping to clean it up. They go in and they clean out the invasive species of plant life in there. They've dedicated so much work. And an end-to-end park, who doesn't love that? That's part of the beautiful aspects of tourism in Penticton. People want to see this. It's gorgeous. Our Oxbows are treasure.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yes.
Jesse Martin?
Definitely no-brainer. I also feel, there's a group called the Friends of the Oxbows, and if it's something that you really care about, I totally recommend check them out. The leader is a guy called Bob Anderson. I've been trying to contact him on Facebook, but I don't know if he uses it much. Is that Bob? I have a message for you, Bob. You're doing awesome work. Thank you. The reason why the Oxbows mean a lot to me, I'm a fisherman first and foremost. I might have mentioned that earlier. I noticed that the Oxbow on Warren Ave, it's got a huge development that came up, the bow. And what they did is they really beat the living crap out of the riparian area there. I used to walk along there and I'd fish. There used to be asparagus that would grow there right in the ground you could pick. Now it's just waste all along it, and the fishing's not so good anymore either. We can't let it happen again. Let's make sure that we protect the rest of the Oxbows and everything we've got. I'll be out there with my trash bag picking up trash too.
Anyone else on the stage there? Okay, Julius?
I think the bow development is actually a very good example of why we need a strong cooperation between the Indian band and ourselves. The bow development is actually on Indian land. And I think with the riparian regulations that the province has, that it actually wouldn't have been able to have been done if it was not on Indian land. So it really is a good example of why there needs to be a well thought out, well negotiated agreement between the city and the Indian band to make sure that we preserve the natural beauty of this area.
This question is directed to Isaac Gilbert, but others can answer, of course. Seeing as ungulates are part of the environment of Penticton, what could you do about the deer?
Or urban deer. Yes, we have a lot of deer in this town. And one thing with deer and ungulates is that they're protected under the Wildlife Act in British Columbia. They're not like rodents like rat, we just can't go in there and kill them. What we can do is a few things. We can educate the public on creating barriers, not attracting the deer to your property. But we could also do a call, but we have to work in hand with the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource and Rural Development. That just rolls right off the tongue. But so to be able to do that, we'd have to go down that process, which is going to take a lot of work. That has to be in conjunction with the RCMP. To me, it's about taking that angle from all areas. Like I said, it's about educating the public, making sure you don't have attractants out. It's about working with Flynn Road to try to working with BC to improve our forests so they have more habitat in the hills to stay in and they don't come down here. And I would like to see at one point a greenway going from one end of the city to the other so that they can move out because they do want to get across the valley because it is a historical path for deer to move past our city.
Andrew?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest problems that there just isn't that political will behind because many people see them as cute and cuddly, and until that happens, it's not going to happen on the provincial level, which is a jurisdiction of the province. Even at the municipal level, we've had difficulty getting that political will to sort of do something about it. And my wife's been chased and stalked by deer, so it does hit home. It is a reality, and there isn't a simple answer. I wish we could, but that is until we have a bit more of a political will behind things. I don't see things changing significantly. The premier is here. Was one thing I actually talked to him about in front of the Herald. Was us laughing. It's because he said, "Yeah, outside my hotel, there's 3 deer sitting right by the lakeside, and we have a problem with sea otters on the island, and people think them as cute and cuddly as well." So it is a bit complicated.
Kevin?
Okay, I already said this before, so I'm going to reiterate it again. Okay, so we need to stop spraying glyphosate in our forest. That is what's making all the animals come in. So I'm going to read exactly from the calendar. Please pick one up, because we should not be culling the deer. Is glyphosate affecting our nature and our environment? Yes, the BC government is allowing logging farms to early spray clear-out areas to kill weeds before replanting. This saturates the land with glyphosate. The low-level foliage is toxic for grazing herbivores such as deer, and also toxic for microorganisms, which is food for many other species from the bottom up. So stop spraying glyphosate. No culling deer.
Okay. Yes. Jesse?
Probably the easiest answer is to make deer feel less comfortable in town here. A big reason why they're down here, and I would say this is pretty much for fact, growing up in another place that had the same problem, is the fact that the deer that are up on the hill are getting hunted. There are a ton of hunters up on the 201 up above Carmi. They come from Vancouver, and it's not safe for the deer in the bush. There are that many hunters out there right now. So where is it safe for deer? In Penticton. They come down here to get away from the hunters. If you go across the river to PIB, there's no deer. Very few deer in PIB itself. Why is that? Because the hunters they're on the res. They will shoot a deer in their backyard if they get a chance. That's not the case in Penticton. So if we want to get rid of deer in Penticton, we have to make them feel less comfortable. That's what it comes down to.
Okay, next question. This is also directed at Darrell Clark, or is directed at two specific candidates, Darrell Clark and John Vasileki. And the question is, do you have any specific plans to assist in having bicycles come through town in a way which is more safe than it is right now?
The simple answer is yes. Currently, I'm sitting on the Transportation Committee, and one of the things we're doing is we're reviewing bike lanes on a regular basis. Now, PACA has just come to it. The Penticton Area Cycling Association has brought back the 2012 cycling plan that was already approved by the city, but there was no political will to put it in. And it entails redesigning the bike lanes, because right now, on Power Street, I have a 2-block bike lane in front of my house that comes from nowhere and ends nowhere. It doesn't help a cyclist at all. They're not being taken anywhere. What we need to do with cycling is we need to separate transportation from recreation. We need to make a cycling network in this town so people can get to work, not just ride their bike recreation around a trail. There needs to be a shift in our thinking so people can actually get to work, and when they get to work, we need them to have a safe bike locker to lock their bike up so it's not being stolen. We need to make it a lot more viable for people to ride their bikes safely.
Good. John?
Thank you very much for the question. I agree with everything Darrell has said. We've got to build bike paths going experiment around the city of Penticton, and to go down corridors that people can actually go up to the industrial area, or they go down to the other part of the city without without traffic and not getting in their way. Like someone said earlier, they've been hit many, many times by car. So we have to make it safe. In certain countries and cities in North America, they have a road, and right beside the road, they have a smaller little road with concrete bunkers in the way, where the car cannot hit those bikers on their way to work or on their way home from work. I believe we have to start looking at that prospect. I think Vancouver has started doing the same thing, and unfortunately the business community disagrees with it, but I think we should start looking at it in Penticton. Thank you.
Thank you. Isaac?
I agree that we need bike lanes in the city, and we need to have separated bike lanes. To get there, we need to build that culture here in Penticton. When the city of Penticton did the study, they found that most people, 60% of people are interested in biking, but they're concerned. And their main concern is safety and convenience. So the plan is not about ramming bike lanes through the city right now, it's about building the culture, to showing people that it's safe. So we had the bike valet system. That's awesome. It proves safety, place to put your bike, and then to also be able to have your bags, and it's convenient for people to walk around the market. So next year, if I'm elected, I hope the council does this anyways, is to increase that service to SOEC events and to other events that are in town. You know, the next step from that is looking at a bike path that will be able to get from one end of the city to the other safely, but to slowly bring people around. I'm not talking about Main Street, I'm talking maybe Winnipeg to Fairview and through the neighborhoods. It's about building that biking culture to get to there. Because if we start ramming stuff in, people are not going to like that. We got to bring people along with us to get people biking in the city.
Okay, Juka and then Connie.
I rode a bike in this city for about 7 years, winter and summer. It's not really that difficult to do. We've got that beautiful little bike lane up on Government Street there. Hardly ever used it, didn't do any business up on Government Street, and I wasn't going to ride my bike all the way up the hill to go across town. I did my business on Main Street. That's where 90% of the business is done. That's our commercial strip. My plan is big. You turn Main Street in 2 lanes both ways, no left turns, outside lanes for bicycles, scooters, anything but an automotive thing. If you want to go straight through town, you go up to Government. But Main Street would be for servicing the businesses that are on Main Street. That's where people go. If you have 2 lanes on either side for all the scooters and the bikes and everything else, they'll be able to get and access all their services. Big downtown walking mall. Connie?
I like Daryl's distinction. I'm also on the Transportation Committee. There is a difference between, we're not talking about so the triathletes have a special corridor. I would not let my children ride their bikes in this city. There are kids that are being driven and dropped off at school all the time because it's not safe. Well, that's part of our traffic congestion, wherever parking. We need to make it safe. The kids can ride their bikes to school. I've been clipped 3 times just this summer riding my bike because I don't have a trailer. I have a sidecar. This is how much lane I have. This is how much bike I have. And cars like to come. It's frightening. I think this is actually something that we need to do more than just ease in. I think we should give it a little bit of a push.
Well, thank you very much. It's 9:30 now, and I think it's time to call an end to the session. I'd like to offer a round of applause to all the candidates. I'd like to thank the audience that came, and we hope you had an opportunity to think things through with them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so just walked off the stage there. It's over. I got to admit, it was a long evening. Lots of good questions. I wasn't too versed for the first set of questions there, but then once we got into some deeper ones there, and again, sorry, I got to recommend that people research glyphosate and what's going on in our forest, okay, because it's responsible for killing food, causing fires. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you the monocropping going on out there. And, you know, I didn't like some of the stuff I heard there. I heard it more than once there in reference to culling the deer. I know they are a problem, but at the same token, we're destroying our homes out there. So we need to start addressing that issue first. Stop spraying out the glyphosate. There was a New Brunswick environment minister that asked if they could do tests to find out how much glyphosate was being sprayed in New Brunswick. And please research this. I think within a month or 2 months, she was fired anyways for asking those questions. So very concerning here. But all in all, I think it was still good though. It's great to be talking about environment because we got a lot of corporations taking us down right now or trying to control our environments. Monsanto can try and control seeds. We got Nestle trying to control our water. These are facts. You can see it all across Canada with Nestle taking water. In British Columbia, I think it's $5.76 per million liters is what they pay. So they keep taking it and then they sell it back to us. And then we got to pay water because apparently we're misusing it. And so again, Kevin Proteau, I am your watchdog. I do have lots of solutions. A great natural Okanagan is my solution, so you can check that out. But I'm here as a watchdog, so I'm trying to give you a heads up. So remember that. Check number 6. Thank you.